Hey guys, you are not going to believe what just happened to me. I had just finished recording this video and the audio had not recorded, so I've got to do it again. It's a little later than I promised. It was totally on time. Life sucks. Oh well. Moving on, here we go again. Alright, so today your title of your notes is Factoring Cubic Functions. You, the student, will be attempting to factor cubic functions. In fact, you will be able to factor cubic functions. You're going to use synthetic division to find your first factor, and then you're going to use the quadratic formula or another factoring method if you choose to factor your leftovers from your synthetic division. Okay, so today the equations you will see pretty much can't be factored the way you know how to factor them, so we've got to go with some other method for this. We'll go ahead and let me show you what I mean. You can watch and you can practice. Alright, so let's say I ask you to factor this. Most of the time they'll be, you won't be able to factor. I know that you guys can factor this one, but let's pretend that it can't be factored because most of the time it can't. So we've got to know what to do every single time. What you do is you come look at the constant over here and you write all the factors of 9. You know you can multiply 9. 1 times 9 or -1 and -9. 3 times 3, negative or positive, and those are the only factors. So 9 has 3 factors, 1, 3, and 9, but you have to have the positive and negative versions for this term. Every time, regardless of whether it's negative or positive, it has to be all of them, the positives and negatives. So now what we're going to do is we're going to start with, let's say we're going to start with, you have to guess and check these things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with, -1, and I'm going to try to use synthetic division to find a factor. Now, if I use synthetic division with one of these numbers is going to work, okay? So when I use synthetic division in this equation right here, if I don't get a remainder, then I get lucky and I have found a one of the factors. So if I don't get a remainder here, then 1, which is the opposite, it's always the opposite of this term, you have to remember it's the opposite of that, then I found a factor of the term, and the little quadratic that I have left I can factor out some other way. So bring down the 1, -1, -1 and -2 is +2, -9 and +2 is -7, -1 times -7 is +7. You know that gives me a remainder, so this choice is not a choice. That number didn't help us do what we needed to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try the +1 and see if that one works. As soon as I can find one, I'll know. So bring down the 1. 1 times 1 is 1. That's 0. 0. -9. 1 times -9. -9. Remainder 0. So the first factor I've found, remember it's always the opposite of this term, is, well, we're going to call this factor 1, 1. So when we go to write that in the equation, we're going to write x minus the factor that we found, so -1. So our first term is x minus 1. Now we're going to take this guy right here and we're going to factor it out, but first we've got to write it as a quadratic. Notice it doesn't have an x, it just is x squared minus 9. Now you guys might automatically say, but Mrs. Frame, I know how to factor that. That's x and x, that's -3 and that's +3. That works out to no x in the middle, so my other two factors are x minus 3 and x plus 3. And many times, guys, you will get to this point and you will be able to factor it out. But if you can't, I just want you to remember that the quadratic formula always, always works when you're factoring a quadratic, or see, we're working on cubics and one step down is the quadratic. So just so you see it for later, over 2 times a, remember what your a is. Your a is 1, your b is on your x, which doesn't exist, and your c is your -9. So if you go plug those in over here, you get the opposite of 0 plus or minus 0 squared minus 4 times 1 times -9 all over 2 times 1. So that's 0, and that ends up being positive 36. So I'm going to write that there. So that's the square root of 36, which is 6. So now I have the positive or negative 6 all over 2. So we go 6 over 2 and negative 6 over 2, and there's my 3 and my negative 3. So you can see quadratic always works. So if you don't feel like messing around with it, plug it into your formula. All right, so here we go. We found the 3 factors. All right, your turn to write down the steps. So here you go, write them down. Step 1, write all the positive negative factors of the constant term. Then choose a factor, use it as the divisor in the synthetic division, and use your function that you were given as the problem you start off with. This is why we learn synthetic division. When you finally find a factor that doesn't have a remainder, you found factor number 1. Okay? Remember, so it's x minus factor number 1. So if it's a 1, it's minus 1. If it's a negative 1, minus a negative 1 means plus 1. So it's always the opposite number. Okay? Then you can either try to factor out the quadratic you found in your synthetic division. You can use a quadratic every time, or you can factor it if you know how to factor it. If it factors, go for it. And you write your factors out. Remember, x minus the factor 1, x minus the factor 2, x minus the factor 3. And don't forget, if it's negative, you put a positive. If it's positive, you put a negative. Okay? And that's it. You're done. And basically what that means is that we're going to find out that these are the roots. So if you say the root is negative 3, positive 3, and negative 1, let's say that those are your roots. This is what you found when you did this work. Then your graph is going to do something like that, and it's going to cross at those points. We'll learn that later. Right now, it's just important that we know how to find the points. All right, so let's try one. So here we have this guy right here, and he's not going to factor very nicely. So what we want to do is we want to write all of our factors of 16. So 1, 2, 4, 8, and 16. And see, I'm going to go back and look at my problem right now, and I'm going to think about 16 and 4, and I'm going to think of the numbers that go into these numbers here. These occur. So maybe I don't want to start with 1, but maybe I should, because this first term is a 1. You never know. You can start anywhere you want. Just keep track of the ones that don't work. So we'll go ahead and start with a negative 1 and see if it works, and if it doesn't, we'll try a 2 or some other term. You can always just systematically start with the positive 1, the negative 1, positive 2, negative 2. Pretty soon you'll find it. So that's negative 1, negative 5, positive 5, 1, negative 1. Got a remainder, so it's not positive 1. So let me get the eraser. We'll try that again. We'll try it with let's try it with a 2. Let's see if the 2 works. And let me erase this down here. So we're going to try it with a 2, so you'll have to do another one. 2 times 1 is 2. 4 minus 2 is negative 2. That's negative 4, which gives you a negative 8. And 2 times negative 8 is negative 16. Woohoo! You found it. All right, so now we know that this is your factor number 1. So it's x minus 2, because it's always minus the factor that you find. Now we're going to go factor this guy. So again, you're looking at this and you're probably going, Mrs. Ray, I factored this 100 times. Boom, I'm done. I told you factoring would never go away. So you're thinking of your factors of negative 8 that are going to give you negative 2. And I'm thinking 4 and negative 2, because that gives you 4x and that gives you negative 2x, and boom, you've got it. You've got your x. But remember that this is your factor 2 and this is your factor 3. So it's x minus your factor 2 and x minus your last term. Let me get that out of the way. I'm going to write it down here. X minus negative 2, which makes it a positive 2. So you have x minus 2, x minus 4, and x plus 2. And again, what that means is when I go to graph this cubic, which has this wave, when you graph it, it's going to cross at negative. Actually, it's going to cross at the opposites of these. So it's going to cross this at the opposite of that, which is 2. The opposite of negative 4, which is 4. And the opposite of 2, which is negative 2. So basically it's going to cross at the numbers that you found. And then it's going to look something like that. Now recall that this right here is your y-intercept, and that would be on here, so it's probably crossing higher way up here. So it probably goes more like that. But anyway, that's what you're doing. So write your summarize, write your questions, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Have a good one.